can get like 7 or 8 feet almost. This one is about 4.5, 5 feet long, but he's not fully grown. He's still growing. Okay. And they're in the upland areas, very common in the sand hills. And their favorite food item there are the pocket gophers. When you see the little mounds of sand in the sand hill ridges in Florida, those are pocket gophers. And they're fossorial. They have like a shovel-shaped head. They burrow under the ground a lot. But they'll come up to sun themselves in the mornings and stuff and get themselves going. Now, snakes are considered ectotherms, so they depend on the environment for their bodily functions to warm up enough to digest their food and to have babies and all that stuff. Okay, here's one showing off, giving a good hiss in the wildlands. Now we have a lot of very diminutive little serpents. We have 3 species of crown snakes in Florida, and this one is actually shedding its skin right where it's going in between my 2 fingers. You can see a little line of whitish material coming up. That's its skin. They start at the nose and they work the skin off from their nose and their chin, and then it pulls down backwards like a lady's taking off her hosiery. And so it's about halfway shed its skin. And I put the nickel there just to give you a little perspective. This is a fully grown adult. So there are a lot of little tiny snakes in Florida too. The most common snake that is abundant in neighborhoods is the southern ringneck snake, although you may not see it like the eastern coral snake. It's very often underneath mulch, eating carpenter ant larvae and stuff like that, little insects and things. And they're very mysterious. God knows what all they eat. But people often find them in their pools in the summer months when they're more active. And I've even found them in our kitchen, little baby ones. I don't know how they get in, but they're tiny, so they can fit in just about any little hole. And the identifying characteristic, of course, is the ring around the neck, and then there's something else to identify. The tip of the tail. Now, under most of the body, the ventral side of this animal is yellow with little black dots on the sides, but the tip of the tail, very often they will turn it up and show a bright orangey red tip of the tail as a threat display to let animals know, don't eat me, I'm going to taste bad, I got some poison in me. That's typically what the red in the environment indicates as a defense for animals. Florida brown snake, another diminutive woodlands reptile. We don't often see them, but in certain habitats they're very abundant. Orlando Wetlands Park, some other areas you can see this species. But just a lot of species will just be abundant in certain habitats where they have not been disturbed and that they find food and are successful in.
Is it because it's wet in Orlando Wetland Park?
Probably, yes. They probably, well, you know, that's the basis for all plant and animal life. They need water, so yes, definitely. And yeah, they probably specialize near the watery areas, collecting their food items that are attracted to the wetlands. Okay, I have this one, and you get to see it's feeding time. This is the Florida water snake. The one in the picture is a different individual, and she dropped 28 babies the day after I took that picture. I'm going to set the microphone down. So I bought some comic goldfish at Pet Supply today to do the demo. This snake has not let me down before. So. It just.
Hear you, Chris.
Okay, I'll talk.
Want me to hold the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the non-venomous one. Most people think it's a cottonmouth, but it's not venomous. You can tell the pupils are round, but not many people want to get that close to see the pupils of a snake. Cottonmouths have elliptical pupils, but this one has the banding color and it has like a wormy-like pattern on the belly. It's got very rough skin. There's a keel, a sharp ridge, a raised ridge down the center line of each scale. And I discovered the use for that in the wetlands working with a civil engineering firm. When they see a predatory bird come near them, are going to shed, they get very dark often. Uh-oh.
There we go.
I don't want to hurt it. Oh. No, it'd be easier for me to talk and walk around. Okay. All right, so back to the Florida water snake. There are many other water snakes that are non-venomous in Florida, but this is the most common one. Another picture of the gravid female when they're about to deliver a litter of babies or a bunch of eggs. It's called being gravid. They're heavy with eggs. And this is a different individual. You can see the wormy pattern on the ventral side, red and white. Sometimes they're more white. This one doesn't have much wormy pattern. It's more white. And this one, I went to a lady's house years ago, way, 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 way down south of Point Siena. And she called me again. She's got horses. And the barn, the first time she had one of these, it was in the tack room in her barn. And this individual, I went there a couple months ago, it was on their back porch near their house. But again, where there are lights on at night, they're creating a food chain and that draws the snakes. And she knew that, but at least she kept my number and called me again. This is a juvenile. Now, some are almost all dark, and some have the bright banding, and a lot of variation in individuals. The eastern garter snake is really beautiful. One of our most beautiful snakes. Doesn't get very long, maybe 2.5, 3 feet long. Sometimes they have a greenish hue in the background. Sometimes they have a blue stripe, really beautiful blue stripe, and of course the garter pattern, kind of a checkered pattern. Really beautiful individual. And this was one they thought was a cottonmouth swimming in their pool.
Wow.
A relative of the garter snake is a more elegant and thin-bodied peninsular ribbon snake. And you see these more in the rural areas, not so much in disturbed habitat. They don't survive well in disturbed areas. So if you're ever down at the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, you'll see these probably. Court snakes, also known as red rat snakes. And this helped start the hobby of keeping snakes as pets or for interest. Very gentle snakes, and now in the pet trade, they're like next to ball pythons in popularity, not only here in the United States, but in the whole world. And they range from the Florida Keys all the way up to New Jersey. That's their natural range. And some individuals were found that had albinism, and through breeding with Mendelian genetics, using the recessive traits, they've come up with all sorts of choices in the industry, in the pet trade. You can get stripes, you can get solids, you can get different colors, you can get different patterns, and the list goes on. So this is one of the females I bred, and with her clutch of eggs. And when they hatch, it'll be a litter of young. Through selective breeding, you can reduce the different pigments. And this individual lacks the pigment erythrocin, which creates the oranges and the reds, the erythrocin pigment. So this one appears to be light gray and dark purpley black. And I have this individual, it's bigger, and you can see him a little bit. I reserve the corn snakes, especially for individuals that want to handle snakes. They're super gentle. Even in the wild, they're reluctant to bite, and of course, they're non-venomous. Red albino corn snake, it lacks the pigment melanin. And I've got an individual like that here today. Very beautiful. But the first one, the wild type, I like all the colors. But I'm going to show you these others too. And I, of course, pose them with the pool in the background and on a shell or whatever, snakes and snails or whatever. Snow corn snake. So we have reduced both pigments. No melanin, no erythrocin. Now there will be little xanthic pigment, which is yellow, which you'll notice near the chin area on the neck of the animal. And I've got an individual here to look at too. And here's one with the desert rose, extra fancy shot. And I thank you all for coming to the program, and I hope you learned a little more appreciation about the wildlife of these reptiles that are among us. And I think it's much more interesting to have more diversity, especially of our native wildlife and plants. And I think that's why we're all here anyway, because we appreciate the wildlife. So, and if you leave snakes alone, I'd like you to leave, them alone, because they will leave you alone. But if you have an interest, certainly find more out about these animals and approach them with caution, because you don't want a venomous bite. If you do have to go to the hospital, our healthcare system will milk all the money out of you. I'm not kidding. These vials of anti-venom cost a fortune. Yeah, I was talking with George Van Horn, the owner of Reptile World Serpentarium, with my mom on Monday, and he described an individual that had a coral snake bite, and he didn't go seek help right away. It was like 10 hours. And if you go early, they don't have to administer as much antivenom, but after the molecules of the venom have already hooked up with different parts of your chemistry, it's harder to loosen them up, and they have to give you a lot more antivenom. And his bill for the hospital visit for one snake bite was $750,000. So please approach them with caution. Okay? And for whoever would like to hold corn snakes, the last table, I've got the 3 bags, and I would love to let you hold the corn snakes. Now remember, like birds, all reptiles can carry salmonella. So whenever you touch birds or reptiles, in the wild or not, it's always good to wash your hands before you touch your face or eat anything and touch any food. Okay, so just as a precautionary. And I've got hand sanitizer you can use afterwards if you want to, but please don't use the hand sanitizer before, because it will dry out the skin of the animals. Okay, but I thank you for coming and for caring for our wildlife.